I am Allison, 32 years old, and after a decade of saving every single paycheck, I finally bought my dream bungalow 6 months ago. My sanctuary, my achievement, my independence, all wrapped in 2 bedrooms and a garden. Then came that Sunday when the doorbell rang. My parents stood there with my brother Ethan, his wife Jessica, their 3 kids, and 8 suitcases. Mom casually said, "We are moving in for a while." That moment changed everything. Before I tell you how my peaceful Sunday turned into a family war, let me know where you are watching from. If you have ever had to protect your boundaries, hit like and subscribe to support others fighting the same battle. Growing up in Warren, Michigan, in a modest, blue-collar neighborhood, I learned early on that our family had an unspoken hierarchy. I was the older sister who always needed to set an example, while my younger brother Ethan was the golden child who could do no wrong. Our childhood home was small but comfortable, with parents who worked hard but had clear favorites. Dad worked at the local automotive plant, and Mom was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. They were good people who somehow never saw the imbalance in how they treated their children. From the time I was 14, I worked after-school jobs, shelving books at the library, then waitressing at the local diner during high school. My parents made it clear that if I wanted to attend college, I would need to figure out how to pay for it myself. Meanwhile, Ethan never held a job during high school. He played sports, went to parties, and lived the carefree teenage life I never experienced. When I graduated high school with honors, there was a small celebration at home. When Ethan graduated with barely passing grades 4 years later, my parents threw him an extravagant party and gifted him a used car. The pattern was established early and never really changed. I worked my way through community college, then transferred to a state university, working 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, eating ramen and working overnight shifts at the hospital to make ends meet. Meanwhile, my parents paid for Ethan to attend the same university, covered his rent in a nice apartment complex, and gave him a monthly allowance. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position in hospital administration. The pay was modest, but I had a plan. Every month, I put aside 50% of my paycheck into savings. No vacations, no fancy clothes, no dinners out. My friends called me obsessive, but I had a dream of owning my own home, something that would be mine alone that no one could take away. For 10 years, I lived this way. I got promoted 3 times, eventually becoming a department administrator at one of Detroit's largest hospitals. But my lifestyle remained frugal. I drove the same reliable Honda I had purchased used after college. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates until I was 30, despite my professional position. Every bonus went straight to my house fund. Ethan, meanwhile, bounced between jobs. He would work somewhere for 6 months, then quit because he did not like his boss, or the hours were too demanding, or he deserved better pay. He married Jessica when they were both 24, and they quickly had 3 children, Tyler age 7, Emma age 5, and little Jacob just 3. Jessica worked on and off as a retail associate, but would quit whenever childcare became too complicated. Whenever Ethan and Jessica faced financial difficulties, which was often, my parents stepped in. They paid their rent when they were short. They bought groceries when money was tight. They purchased clothes for the grandchildren and paid for preschool tuition. The bank of Mom and Dad was always open for Ethan and his family, while I continued to save and work toward my goal independently. 6 months ago, my dream finally became reality. After a decade of disciplined saving, I purchased a small but charming 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood just outside Detroit. The house was not large or fancy, but it was mine. I remember the day I got the keys, standing alone in my empty living room, crying tears of pride and joy. I had done this myself. No one had helped me. No one could claim any part of my achievement. I spent weekends painting walls and planting flowers in the small garden. I carefully selected each piece of furniture, often finding quality pieces at estate sales that I lovingly restored. My home office occupied the 2nd bedroom, a sacred space where I could work from home when needed and pursue my passion for watercolor painting on weekends. My sanctuary had large windows that let in natural light, hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot, and a kitchen with just enough counter space for my modest cooking needs. It was perfect for me with exactly enough room for my life and my belongings. At family gatherings, my homeownership was acknowledged with passing comments like, "That is nice, Allison," before the conversation quickly turned to Ethan's latest job prospect, or the cute thing one of his children had done. I did not mind. I had stopped seeking my family's approval years ago. My home was for me, not for their validation. At our last family dinner 3 weeks ago, Ethan had mentioned some vague housing issues. Their landlord was being difficult, he said. The apartment had maintenance problems. Jessica chimed in that the neighborhood was declining. I made sympathetic noises but did not offer any solutions. Years of experience had taught me that getting involved in their problems only led to being taken advantage of. That Sunday morning had started so peacefully. I woke early, as was my habit, and enjoyed coffee on my small back porch. The spring air was cool, but pleasant birds were singing in the maple tree I had planted when I first moved in, and I felt that deep contentment that comes from being exactly where you are supposed to be. I had plans to spend the day painting and perhaps calling my friend Diane to meet for an early dinner. Then the doorbell rang. I was not expecting visitors. In my robe and slippers, coffee mug in hand, I opened the front door to find my entire family standing on my porch. Mom and Dad in front, with Ethan, Jessica, and their 3 children behind them. At their feet sat multiple suitcases, duffel bags, and plastic storage containers. For a moment, I thought I was still asleep, having some bizarre dream. "Surprise," my mother said, her voice overly cheerful. "We have come to help Ethan and his family move in for a while. They need a place to stay." I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain struggling to process what was happening. Before I could respond, my father stepped forward, patting my shoulder as he moved past me into the house. "Where should we put all this stuff?" he asked, gesturing to the luggage. "Ethan, come help me bring in the rest from the car." The rest. There was more. Jessica guided her children through the door, next barely making eye contact with me. "Kids, go explore your new home. But be careful not to break anything," she added as an afterthought as the 3 children raced past me. "Wait," I finally managed to say, but no one was listening. My mother was already in the kitchen, opening cupboards and the refrigerator, making comments about needing to go grocery shopping. Ethan and my father were making trips back and forth from their minivan, bringing in more bags and boxes. "You have a nice place here, Allie," Ethan said casually, using the childhood nickname I had repeatedly asked him not to use. "A bit small for all of us, but we will make it work." "All of us," I echoed, watching in disbelief as Tyler and Emma began jumping on my sofa, their shoes still on their feet. "Just until we find a new place," Jessica said, finally addressing me directly. She was pulling toys out of a bag and spreading them across my carefully arranged living room. "Your brother said you would not mind. Family helps family, right?" I heard a crash from my office, followed by the sound of my 3-year-old nephew wailing. Jessica sighed dramatically. "Jacob, honey, mommy is coming." She hurried down the hallway without a backwards glance. My father returned with another box. "Where should we set up the kids' beds?" "The second bedroom seems a bit small for all 3 of them." "That is my office," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I work from there." My mother emerged from the kitchen. "Well, you can move all that office stuff into the dining area for now. It is not like you entertain much anyway." She said it matter-of-factly, as though she was commenting on the weather. I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. Nobody had asked me if this arrangement was okay. Nobody had even given me warning. They had simply shown up with their belongings, expecting to move into my home. I suddenly remembered snippets of conversation from the last family dinner. Ethan saying their lease was up soon. Jessica mentioning how nice my neighborhood was. My mother commenting that I had so much space for just one person. They had been dropping hints, I realized, but I had missed them completely. "How long are you planning to stay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Ethan and Jessica exchanged a look. "Well," my brother said slowly, "we gave up our apartment already. The lease ended, and with the rent going up, it just did not make sense to renew. So, just until we get back on our feet. Which means what, a week, a month? I pressed. Oh, honey, my mother interjected, we cannot put a timeline on family helping family. They will stay as long as they need to. I felt a headache forming behind my eyes. My peaceful Sunday was dissolving into chaos. The sound of children running and shouting filled my once quiet home. Jacob had recovered from whatever had caused him to cry and was now pulling books from my shelves and dropping them on the floor. We will need your bedroom, of course, Ethan said, as if it was the most reasonable request in the world. Jessica and I need the privacy, and your room is the only one big enough for us and Jacob. The kids can have the second bedroom once we clear out your office stuff. And where exactly am I supposed to sleep? I asked, my voice getting louder despite my efforts to stay calm. The sofa pulls out right, Jessica called from the hallway. It will just be temporary. Temporary. A word my family had used many times over the years when asking for favors that somehow always became permanent. Temporary loans that were never repaid. Temporary childcare that became regular obligations. Temporary housing that stretched into months. I watched as Tyler discovered my collection of hand-painted ceramic bowls displayed on a shelf. His small fingers reached for one, and I quickly moved across the room to stop him. Please do not touch those, I said firmly. They are fragile. Do not be so uptight, my mother chided. He is just curious. Children need to explore. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. This was my home, my sanctuary, my hard-earned reward after years of sacrifice. And it was being invaded, rearranged, and taken over without my consent. I needed to say something to establish boundaries, but the right words would not come. I had spent a lifetime accommodating my family's needs and wants above my own. The pattern was so deeply ingrained that breaking it felt almost impossible. Jessica emerged from the hallway, a contemplative look on her face. Your closet is pretty full, she said. We will need to clear out at least half of it for our things. And maybe we can move that dresser to the garage. We brought our own that matches our bed frame better. That was when I saw her holding something in her hands. My grandmother's antique jewelry box. The only thing I had inherited when she passed away. Jessica was absently opening and closing it, examining the contents as if they were on display at a store. Please put that back, I said, my voice sharper than before. That was my grandmother's. Jessica looked surprised at my tone but returned to my bedroom with the jewelry box. When she came back, she was carrying an armful of my clothes. I thought I would get started on making some room, she explained, dropping my carefully hung blouses and dresses onto a chair. You will not need all these work clothes anyway, since you will be sleeping in the living room. I stood in the middle of my own living room watching as my carefully created home was being dismantled around me. This was the moment I realized I had a choice to make. I could fall back into the familiar pattern of acquiescence, of putting my family's demands above my own needs, or I could finally stand up for myself. Watching Jessica casually sorting through my clothes, deciding which ones to move and which ones I could keep, something inside me shifted. A lifetime of giving in suddenly crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. This was my home. I had worked for it. I had sacrificed for it. And I was not going to give it up. Stop, I said loud enough that everyone in the house paused what they were doing. Just stop right now. My mother looked up from where she was rearranging my kitchen cabinets. My father froze in the doorway with another box. Ethan and Jessica exchanged confused glances. Even the children sensed the shift in atmosphere and grew momentarily quiet. I think there has been a misunderstanding, I continued, struggling to keep my voice steady. I was not consulted about any of this. No one asked if you could move in here. My mother laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Asked, why would we need to ask? We are family. Family helps family. That phrase does not give you the right to take over my home without my permission, I replied, feeling a strange calm descend over me as I finally spoke my truth. My father set down the box he was holding and frowned at me. Allison, your brother and his family need help. They lost their apartment. They did not lose it, I corrected. Ethan just said they chose not to renew their lease. Because the rent went up, Ethan interjected defensively. Did the rent go up, or did you fall behind on payments again? I asked, suddenly suspicious. I had heard this story before, multiple variations of it throughout the years. The look that passed between Ethan and Jessica told me everything I needed to know. We were a little behind, Ethan admitted reluctantly. But the landlord was being unreasonable. We only missed 2 months, and he started threatening eviction. 2 months, I repeated. Ethan, both you and Jessica have jobs. Where is your money going? Jessica bristled visibly. We have 3 children to support. Do you have any idea how expensive that is? I glanced at the designer purse she had casually tossed on my coffee table, the latest iPhone sticking out of her pocket, and the brand new sneakers all 3 children were wearing. Yes, children were expensive, but I had seen their social media posts about their weekend trips, the new gaming system they had bought last month, and the expensive restaurant meals they regularly enjoyed. You both work full-time, I pointed out, and Mom and Dad help you constantly, yet somehow you never have enough money for rent. Do not judge their situation, my mother snapped. Not everyone can be as perfect as you, Allison. Perfect. That was rich. I had never been the perfect one in our family dynamic. That role had always belonged to Ethan. This is not about being perfect, I said. This is about respecting boundaries. You cannot just show up at my door and expect to move in. This is my home. Your home, my father repeated slowly, as if the concept was foreign to him. We are talking about family here, Allison. Blood. Would you really turn away your own brother and his children? The guilt trip. It was so familiar I could have recited the script along with him. Family above all else. Blood is thicker than water. What kind of person turns away family in need? I would have been happy to discuss ways I could help, I said carefully. But this moving in without asking, taking over my bedroom, rearranging my things, that is not acceptable. Ethan stepped forward, his expression a mix of confusion and growing anger. So what are we supposed to do? We have nowhere else to go. We gave up our apartment already. That was your choice, I pointed out. A choice you made without consulting me first. We did not think we needed to consult you, Jessica, said her voice rising. Your brother said you would help. You always act so high and mighty with your responsible job and your saving habits. We thought you would want to share what you have. Share what I have. As if my home, my sanctuary, the result of 10 years of sacrifice and discipline, was community property, to be claimed by anyone with a family connection. I have shared plenty over the years, I said, memories flooding back. The loans I had given Ethan that were never repaid. The times I had watched his children for free when their babysitter canceled. The birthday and Christmas gifts I always made sure were generous even when my own budget was tight. That is what family does, my mother insisted. We share. We help each other. When has Ethan ever helped me? I asked quietly. The question hung in the air. No one had an answer. I watched as Tyler resumed jumping on my sofa, his shoes leaving dirty marks on the cushions I had saved for months to afford. Emma had found my watercolor supplies and was opening tubes of paint on the carpet. Jacob was pulling more books from the shelves, dropping them carelessly on the floor. Your children are destroying my things, I pointed out, and none of you are doing anything to stop them. They are just being kids, Jessica said dismissively. You cannot expect them to understand your fancy rules. Fancy rules? Like not jumping on furniture with shoes on. Like not opening paint tubes on carpet. Like not throwing books on the floor. Basic respect for another person's property was now considered fancy rules. The realization hit me then with perfect clarity. This was never going to change. The dynamic had been set decades ago, and nothing I said or did would alter it. Ethan would always take, and I would always be expected to give. My parents would always enable him and dismiss my boundaries. Unless I changed it, right now. I need everyone to stop what they are doing, I said, my voice stronger now. This is not going to work. You cannot stay here. My mother's mouth fell open in shock. What do you mean we cannot stay? Of course they can stay. They are family. Being family does not give you the right to take advantage of me, I said. And that is what this is, taking advantage. How dare you, my father said, his face reddening. After everything we have done for you. I almost laughed at that. What exactly have you done for me, Dad? You did not help me through college. You did not help me buy this house. You have never supported my goals or celebrated my achievements. So, please tell me what I owe you. My words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of shock across the room. No one in my family was used to me speaking so directly, so honestly. I had always been the peacekeeper, the one who went along to get along. I think you are being incredibly selfish right now, Ethan said, crossing his arms over his chest. You have this whole house for just one person. We have 5 people to house. That is not my responsibility, I replied. I bought this house for myself with my own money after years of saving. I did not buy it to be a free hotel for you when you mismanage your finances. Jessica scoffed. Of course you would throw money in our faces, just because you do not have children to support. That was a choice, I interrupted. Just like your financial decisions are choices. Choices have consequences. I could see the situation escalating. My brother's face was growing darker with anger. My mother was beginning to tear up her go-to tactic when she was not getting her way. My father looked like he was about to launch into a lecture about family loyalty. But for once, I did not care. Years of suppressed feelings were finally finding their voice. Years of being taken for granted, of having my boundaries ignored, of being expected to sacrifice while Ethan was coddled. I want all of you to pack up your things and leave, I said firmly. Now. My mother's face crumpled like tissue paper in rain. You cannot be serious, she gasped. You would throw your own family out. Where are we supposed to go? That is not my problem, I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Never had I been so direct, so firm with my family. You should have thought about that before you gave up your apartment and showed up on my doorstep unannounced. I cannot believe what I am hearing, my father thundered. His face had turned an alarming shade of red. Your own flesh and blood needs help, and you are turning them away. Yes, I said simply. I am. Jessica was now gathering her children close, as if protecting them from me, the heartless monster who would not let them take over my home. I told you this was a bad idea, she hissed at Ethan. She has always been cold and selfish. Cold and selfish. Because I would not give up my home, my privacy, my bedroom to people who had shown no respect for my boundaries or belongings. Where will we sleep tonight? Ethan demanded, his voice rising. Have you thought about that? Where will my children sleep? You should have thought about that before you gave up your apartment, I repeated. This lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. My mother began to cry in earnest, now loud, theatrical sobs that had worked wonders in manipulating me throughout my childhood. My grandchildren, she wailed. On the street? They will not be on the street, I said, unmoved by the display. You and Dad have a 3-bedroom house. They can stay with you. Our house is being renovated, my father snapped. The upstairs is torn apart. We are staying in a hotel ourselves right now. This was news to me. When did this renovation start? Last week, my mother said between sobs. We thought it would be the perfect time since Ethan and his family would be staying with you. The pieces clicked into place. This was not a spontaneous decision. This had been planned, coordinated. My parents had started home renovations knowing they would push Ethan and his family onto me. They had all discussed this, arranged it without ever once considering that I should have a say in the matter. So you decided amongst yourselves that I would house everyone without ever asking me. The betrayal cut deeper than I had expected. No one answered. Their silence was confirmation enough. That is not how this works, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You do not get to make decisions about my home, my space, my life without consulting me. Where do we sleep? My mother suddenly screamed, her voice rising to a pitch I had never heard from her before. Her face was contorted with anger and disbelief. If you throw us out, where do we sleep? The room fell silent after her outburst. The children, startled by their grandmother's scream, had stopped their destructive exploration of my home and were watching the adult drama unfold with wide eyes. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The moment to break the pattern once and for all. You will not sleep here, I said quietly but firmly. Not tonight, not any night. My father stepped toward me, his finger pointing accusingly. If you do this, if you turn your back on family when they need you, you are no daughter of mine. The threat that had terrified me for years, exclusion from the family, being disowned, cut off, it had kept me in line, kept me accepting mistreatment, kept me giving until I had nothing left to give. But standing in my own home, looking at the presumption and entitlement on their faces, I realized something profound. The threat had lost its power. What exactly would I be losing if I were cut off from this dynamic? The constant expectation to give while receiving nothing in return, the dismissal of my accomplishments, the disregard for my boundaries. That is your choice to make, I told him calmly. But this is my home and I choose who stays in it. After everything we have done for you, my mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. This is how you repay us. What exactly have you done for me? I asked again, genuinely curious what they believed they had contributed to my life as an adult. We raised you, my father bellowed. Yes, you did. That was your obligation as parents. It does not give you the right to dictate my life now that I am an adult. Ethan stepped forward, his face a mask of contempt. You have always thought you were better than us. With your fancy job and your perfect credit score and your little house that you love to remind everyone you bought, all by yourself. I do not think I am better than you, I corrected him. I just made different choices. And I have every right to be proud of what I have accomplished. So your accomplishments are more important than your family, Jessica interjected. More important than giving your nieces and nephew a place to stay. My boundaries are important, I clarified, and you have all shown complete disregard for them today. I looked around at the chaos they had created in less than an hour. Books scattered across the floor, dirty shoe prints on my sofa, my clothes piled carelessly on a chair, toys strewn across every surface, and not one of them had made any attempt to control the children or respect my space. Mom promised we could stay here as long as we needed, Ethan said, a note of desperation entering his voice for the first time. She said you had plenty of room and would be happy to help. I turned to my mother, who had the grace to look slightly ashamed. You had no right to make that promise. I did not think you would be so heartless, she replied defensively. Setting boundaries is not heartless, I said. Showing up unannounced with all your belongings and expecting to take over someone's home, that is heartless. We have already registered the kids for school in this district, Jessica said, dropping another bombshell. Tyler starts on Monday. I stared at her in disbelief. You enrolled your children in schools here before even asking if you could stay with me. We did not think you would say no, Ethan exploded. What kind of person says no to family? The kind who has been taken advantage of her entire life and is finally saying enough, I replied. The situation was escalating beyond my control. Voices were rising. The children had started crying, picking up on the tension in the room. My carefully cultivated sanctuary had become a battleground. I need all of you to leave now, I said, moving toward the front door and opening it wide. Take your things and go. You cannot be serious, my father said, his voice dangerously low. I am completely serious, I replied. This is my home and I am asking you to leave. And if we refuse, Ethan challenged, taking a step toward me. I had anticipated this moment, the moment when they would call my bluff, expecting me to back down as I always had before. But this time was different. This time I had something worth fighting for. My independence, my sanctuary, my self-respect. Then I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing, I said, taking my phone from my pocket. A collective gasp went through the room, the ultimate betrayal in their eyes, involving outsiders and family business. Breaking the sacred code of handling things within the family, which had always meant giving in to their demands. "You would not dare," my mother whispered. I unlocked my phone and began dialing. "Try me." The memory of their faces as they realized I was serious will stay with me forever. Shock, betrayal, disbelief, and underneath it all a dawning understanding that the old rules no longer applied. As they grudgingly began gathering their belongings, muttering about my cruelty and selfishness, I stood by the door, phone in hand, ready to make good on my threat if necessary. It did not come to that. Within 20 minutes, they had loaded their belongings back into their vehicles, the children still crying, my parents and brother still seething with righteous indignation. "This is not over," my father said as he passed me on his way out. "You will regret this decision." I said nothing, simply held the door as they filed out. When the last suitcase had been removed and the door closed behind them, I leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. But underneath the physical stress, reactions was something unexpected. Relief, pride, a sense of having finally stood up for myself in a meaningful way. As I began picking up the scattered books and toys they had left behind, I found myself thinking about the patterns that had led us to this moment. The family dynamic had been set so early that I could not remember a time when Ethan was not the favored child and I, the responsible one, expected to make sacrifices. When we were children, Ethan had broken my science fair project the night before it was due. Instead of punishing him, my parents had insisted I forgive him immediately and stay up all night remaking the project. "He did not mean to," they had said. "He is younger than you. You need to set an example." When I was 16 and saved enough from my library job to buy a second-hand bicycle, Ethan had borrowed it without permission and left it unlocked outside his friend's house where it was promptly stolen. My parents had suggested I use my savings to buy another one. "He is just forgetful," they had said. "You should have put it away somewhere safer." The pattern continued into our adult years. When I graduated college, the family celebration was modest. When Ethan graduated 2 years later, my parents threw a lavish party and asked me to help pay for it because your brother's achievement is so important, and we are a little short this month. Even my career achievements were minimized. When I received my first promotion to department supervisor, my mother's response had been, "That is nice, dear. Did you hear Ethan is thinking of starting his own business?" The business never materialized, but my promotion was forgotten in the excitement over Ethan's potential. When I bought my house, my parents had visited once, made polite comments about it being cozy, then spent the rest of the visit talking about how Ethan and Jessica really needed a bigger place for their growing family. The hints had started almost immediately. "You have a spare bedroom, Allison. It seems so wasteful for just one person." I had spent years in therapy working through my feelings about my family dynamic. My therapist, Dr. Barnes, had helped me recognize the pattern of emotional neglect and the unfair expectations placed on me from childhood. She had helped me understand that my worth was not determined by what I could give to others, that having boundaries was healthy, not selfish. But understanding a dynamic intellectually and breaking it emotionally are two different things. Today was the first time I had truly stood my ground against the full force of my family's expectations and manipulation tactics. I thought about all the times Ethan had shown up unannounced at my apartment during college, needing money for books or rent or car repairs. How I had given him my grocery money and eaten ramen for weeks as a result. How he had never once paid me back or even thanked me properly. I remembered the many family gatherings where I was expected to help cook and clean while Ethan and my father watched sports on television. The countless times I had adjusted my schedule to babysit my nieces and nephew on short notice because Jessica had more important commitments. There was the time last Christmas when I had spent weeks selecting thoughtful gifts for everyone within my budget, but carefully chosen for each person's interests and needs. Ethan and Jessica had given me a generic bath set from the drugstore, the kind bought in a last-minute dash. My parents had seemed embarrassed by the disparity but had said nothing. Or the time I had been hospitalized with pneumonia 3 years ago. I had been sick for days before finally driving myself to the emergency room when I could barely breathe. I had called my parents from the hospital and they had expressed concern but explained they could not visit because they were helping Ethan and Jessica move to their new apartment. No one from my family had visited me during my 5-day hospital stay. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that today's confrontation had been inevitable. The pattern of giving and taking had been unsustainable. Something had to break eventually, and it happened to be my patience, my willingness to be the family doormat. My phone began ringing almost immediately after they left. First my mother, then my father, then Ethan. I silenced each call, not ready to engage in another round of guilt and manipulation. Text messages followed, ranging from pleading to threatening. "How could you do this to your family?" my mother wrote. "You will regret this decision," came from my father. "Hope you enjoy your empty house while your nieces and nephews sleep in a hotel," Ethan texted. I put my phone on silent and continued cleaning up the mess they had left behind. With each book returned to the shelf, each toy removed from my carpet, I felt my sanctuary slowly returning to normal. My space, my rules, my life. That evening, as I sat on my now quiet porch with a cup of tea, I realized something profound. The rope that had been pulling me back into unhealthy patterns had not been cut by them. It had been released by me. I had finally let go of the need to please people who could never be satisfied, to earn approval that would never be given freely. The calls and texts continued throughout the night and into the next day. I read them but did not respond. What was there to say? I had made my position clear. No amount of guilt or manipulation would change my mind. On Monday morning, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Allison, came a voice I vaguely recognized. "This is your Aunt Susan, your mother's sister." Aunt Susan lived in Florida and rarely involved herself in family matters. We exchanged Christmas cards but little else. "Hello, Aunt Susan," I said cautiously. "I just got off the phone with your mother," she said, her voice heavy with disapproval. "She told me what happened yesterday. How could you turn away your brother and his children? That is not how we raised you." And so it began. The flying monkeys. Family members who had never shown particular interest in my life, suddenly calling to express their disappointment in my choices. Uncle Robert called next. Then my father's cousin Patricia. Even my grandmother, who rarely used her cell phone, managed to leave a voicemail about the importance of family. The narrative had been set. I was the villain. The heartless sister who had turned away innocent children. The selfish daughter who had failed to honor her parents. The story was being spread throughout the extended family, carefully crafted to paint me in the worst possible light. I did not attempt to defend myself. I knew from experience that my side of the story would be dismissed, minimized, disbelieved. The family mythology had no room for Ethan being irresponsible or my parents enabling his behavior. I was the bad guy. I always had been in their version of events. For the first time in my life, I was okay with that. The week following what I now think of as the invasion attempt was one of the most emotionally challenging of my life. The barrage of calls, texts, and social media messages continued unabated. My parents took turns between guilt-tripping and threatening. Ethan vacillated between angry accusations and wounded victimhood. Jessica posted vague but pointed comments on social media about toxic family members and selfish people who put material possessions above children's welfare. I maintained my silence, which only seemed to infuriate them more. They were used to me engaging, explaining, eventually apologizing even when I had done nothing wrong. My refusal to participate in the drama was perhaps the most radical act of all. On Wednesday evening, 3 days after the confrontation, there was a knock at my door. Looking through the peephole, I saw my father standing on the porch alone. His posture was rigid, his face set in stern lines. I considered not answering, but decided it was better to face him directly than prolong the situation. I opened the door but did not invite him in. "Allison," he began, his voice deliberately controlled. "I have come to talk some sense into you. This has gone on long enough." There is nothing to discuss, I said calmly. My decision is final. Your mother is beside herself, he continued as if I had not spoken. She can hardly eat or sleep. Is that what you wanted? To make your mother ill with worry? The guilt tactic again. It had worked so effectively in the past. Mom's emotional state is not my responsibility, I replied. Neither is Ethan's housing situation. My father's face darkened with anger. How can you be so cold? These are not strangers we are talking about. This is your family. Being family does not give you the right to disrespect my boundaries, I said. I have made my position clear. And I have made mine clear, he snapped. If you persist in this selfishness, do not consider yourself part of this family anymore. The threat I had feared for so long. Except now, standing in the doorway of my own home, I realized it had lost its power over me. If being part of the family means giving up my home, my privacy, and my self-respect, then perhaps that is for the best, I said quietly. He stared at me for a long moment, seemingly unable to process that his ultimate threat had failed. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car. I closed the door and leaned against it. Tears finally coming. Not tears of regret or fear, but tears of release. I was grieving the family I had always wished for, but never had. The supportive parents who celebrated my achievements. The brother who respected my boundaries. The family unit that functioned with mutual love and respect, rather than obligation and guilt. The next morning, I called Dr. Barnes and scheduled an emergency therapy session. I needed help processing what had happened and preparing for what might come next. You did something incredibly difficult, she told me during our session. You broke a lifelong pattern and stood up for yourself against intense pressure. That takes extraordinary courage. Then why do I feel so terrible? I asked. Because you have been conditioned to believe that your needs do not matter, she explained. Because you have been taught that setting boundaries is selfish. Because your family has trained you to feel responsible for their emotions and choices. We spent the hour discussing healthy boundaries and the grief that comes with recognizing unhealthy family dynamics. She reminded me that I had done nothing wrong by protecting my space and my peace. Your home represents more than just physical shelter, she pointed out. It represents your independence, your achievement, your right to determine your own life. Defending it was defending yourself. The weekend approached, and with it came the monthly family dinner that had been a tradition for years. Normally held at my parents' house, it had been moved to my aunt and uncle's home due to my parents' ongoing renovations. I received no invitation, which was both painful and a relief. Sunday evening, as I sat alone in my peaceful living room, my phone lit up with a group text from my cousin. It was a photo from the family dinner, everyone gathered around the table, smiling for the camera. The caption read, "Family is everything." The exclusion was deliberate, designed to hurt me, to show me what I was missing by not complying with the family's demands. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I was spending a Sunday evening exactly as I wanted to, without the tension and walking on eggshells that family gatherings always entailed. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the intensity of the communication campaign began to wane. The daily calls became every other day, then twice a week. The text messages grew less frequent. Family members who had been enlisted to pressure me seemed to lose interest in the crusade. I learned through a mutual friend that Ethan and his family had moved in with my parents at their hotel suite, creating a cramped but workable living arrangement until the house renovations were completed. Exactly the solution that should have been implemented from the beginning rather than trying to displace me from my home. 3 weeks in, I received an unexpected text from Jessica. The kids miss their aunt. Tyler keeps asking when we can visit you again. It was a peace offering of sorts, though, one that still carried an undercurrent of manipulation. The implication was clear: if I wanted a relationship with my nieces and nephew, I would need to make amends. I replied carefully, I miss them too. When things have settled down, perhaps we can arrange a day at the park. A neutral public meeting place. A time-limited engagement. Clear boundaries. She did not respond. A month after the confrontation, I received a text from Ethan. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from him. "I have been thinking about what happened," he wrote. "I still think you could have handled it better, but I understand why you were upset. We should have asked first." Not a real apology. No acknowledgement of the entitlement or boundary violations, but a small step toward awareness. I did not reply immediately. I needed time to consider whether and how to engage. After consulting with Dr. Barnes, I sent a brief response. "Thank you for acknowledging that. In the future, I hope we can communicate more directly about expectations and boundaries." He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Not exactly a heartfelt reconciliation, but a start. 6 weeks after the confrontation, my mother called. I had been expecting this call, knowing that of all family members, she would find it hardest to maintain the silence. "Allison," she said when I answered, her voice carefully neutral. "How are you?" "I am fine, Mom," I replied. "How are you?" "The renovations are finally finished," she said, ignoring my question. "The house looks beautiful. You should come see it sometime." An olive branch extended awkwardly but genuinely. "I would like that," I said. "Maybe next weekend." "That would be nice," she replied, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Just you, though. Ethan and his family are still staying with us while they look for a new place." Progress. She was respecting at least one boundary, acknowledging that I might not be ready to see my brother yet. "Just me," I agreed. As I hung up, I realized that standing firm had done what years of accommodating never could. It had begun to shift the dynamic. Not completely, not permanently perhaps, but enough to create space for a different kind of relationship. My home remained my sanctuary. My boundaries had held firm. And somewhere along the way, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. 6 months have passed since that Sunday morning, when my family showed up on my doorstep with suitcases and expectations. 6 months of rebuilding relationships on new terms, of maintaining boundaries, of learning to trust my own judgment above the protests and demands of others. My home remains my sanctuary. I have added new plants to the garden, repainted the kitchen a sunny yellow that makes me smile each morning, and converted part of my office into a proper art studio where I can pursue my watercolor painting with dedication. Every corner of this space reflects my choices, my taste, my life. The peace I feel when I walk through the front door each evening is worth every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable confrontation. The relationship with my family has evolved in ways I never expected. There have been setbacks and difficult moments, but also surprising progress. The journey has not been linear, but it has been meaningful. My mother and I have established a new kind of relationship. We meet for lunch every other week, just the two of us. Our conversations remain somewhat superficial, but there is a growing respect between us. She no longer asks me to babysit at the last minute or makes comments about my extra space. When she recently complimented my latest promotion at work without immediately changing the subject to Ethan, I nearly fell out of my chair in shock. My father has been slower to adjust to the new normal. He remains somewhat distant, uncomfortable with the shift in power dynamics. But even he has begun to show small signs of change. Last month, when I mentioned a problem I was having with my car, he offered advice without taking over or criticizing my decisions. It was a small thing, but significant. Ethan and I have maintained a cautious distance. We see each other at family gatherings, but rarely communicate directly. He sent me a birthday card last month, store-bought, but with a handwritten note that said simply, "Hope your day is special. Thanks for being there for the kids." Not an explicit acknowledgement of past wrongs, but a far cry from the entitled demands of 6 months ago. Jessica remains cool toward me, but she has respected my boundaries regarding the children. We have established a monthly outing where I take my nieces and nephew to a museum, park, or child-friendly event. These visits are scheduled in advance, time-limited, and take place outside my home. The children have adjusted to this new arrangement and seem to enjoy our special Aunt Allison days. Perhaps the most profound changes have been internal. Through continued therapy and reflection, I have come to understand that establishing boundaries is not just about saying no to others, it is about saying yes to myself. Yes, to my needs, my dreams, my right to determine the course of my own life. I have learned that helping others is meaningful only when it comes from genuine choice, not obligation or fear. The difference between generosity and enabling is consent. When I choose to help my family now, it is a deliberate decision made with clear expectations and limits, not a reflexive response to guilt or manipulation. The most unexpected outcome has been watching Ethan begin to take responsibility for his own life. Without the safety net of my home as a fallback option, he and Jessica have made some significant changes. They both work full-time now and have moved into an apartment they can actually afford. According to my mother, they have started a budgeting system and are taking financial literacy classes at the community center. Would these changes have happened if I had given in that Sunday morning? If I had allowed them to take over my home, my bedroom, my life? I doubt it. By refusing to enable their irresponsible behavior, I inadvertently gave them the gift of consequence, the opportunity to grow and change. There is a profound difference between helping and enabling. Helping empowers the other person to solve their own problems. Enabling shields them from the consequences of their actions, preventing growth and perpetuating dependency. For years, my entire family had been caught in a cycle of enabling, with Ethan never having to face the results of his choices. Last week, I received a text from Ethan that nearly brought me to tears. "The kids and I just signed a lease on our own apartment," he wrote. 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy, but it is ours. Jessica and I are working opposite shifts for now, so someone is always with the kids. It is hard, but it feels good to stand on our own feet. I stared at those words for a long time. It feels good to stand on our own feet. Perhaps that was the gift I had given my brother by refusing to be his safety net. The opportunity to discover his own strength, his own capability. My mother called yesterday to invite me to a family dinner this weekend. "Ethan and the kids will be there," she said. "They are celebrating the new apartment. I thought you might want to be part of it." The invitation was offered without pressure or guilt, a simple acknowledgement that I am still part of the family, despite having established firm boundaries. Progress indeed. As I sit here in my peaceful garden on another Sunday morning, coffee and handbirds singing in the maple tree that has grown noticeably in the past 6 months, I reflect on how far we have all come. The journey has been painful at times, but necessary. My home remains my sanctuary, my achievement, my independence. But it represents something even more important now. It represents my worth, my right to determine my own boundaries, my courage to stand firm in the face of pressure and guilt. Every room, every personal touch, every moment of peace within these walls reminds me of the stand I took and the growth that followed. If you have ever faced a similar situation, struggling to establish boundaries with family or friends who feel entitled to more than you can give, I hope my story offers some comfort and courage. Standing your ground is difficult, especially with those you love. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others and for yourself is to say no, when no is the right answer. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you handle it, and what was the outcome? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the courage they need to protect their own boundaries. And if this story resonated with you, please hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, you have the right to protect your peace, your space, and your sanity, no matter what anyone else might say. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to stand firm in your own life.